Hello and welcome back for yet another edition of the Electric Election podcast. Of course, we are on a road trip around America. At this point, we are in Sequim, Washington. We're on a river with Ron Allen. He is the head of the tribal council and the CEO of the local Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe. Ron, thank you so much for joining us and letting us be a part of your environment.
Well, thank you. It's an honor. This topic of protecting the environment and balancing it out with growth is a very important issue for my tribe, and so it's an honor to be here with you and Benji.
Well, I mean, just to even get started, the reason that we met was you had recently won a environmental award about your work here on the tribe, or in the tribe, and it's pretty impressive what you've been able to accomplish during your time here. Can you just open up by talking about, you've developed a love for nature being here on the Pacific Northwest Olympic coast. Can you give us some highlights of some of the amazing initiatives that have happened here on the coast and within the tribe?
Yeah, thank you, Benji. I grew up here, so I'm 73, and so I basically was born down at the Jamestown village, and eventually I grew up with my family in Port Angeles, where the work was, so many years ago. But my dad and I spent many a year here on the Dungeness River fishing. In fact, this river was so plentiful with salmon, I could come down with a little gaff hook and just gaff them, throw them up on the bank, and we come home, smoke a couple dozen of them without any problem whatsoever. It was interesting. My journey as a tribal leader is one that started late. I was in my 30s before I actually got engaged with the tribe, and I always had an agenda for the tribe, and the agenda was helping the tribe become self-reliant as a government, and in order to serve our community and take care of our responsibilities, which includes natural resources. Treaty rights is always a big issue for all tribes in the Northwest, including my tribe, and protection of the salmon resource is fundamental to it. So I learned early on why it was important, and why it was important to understand the balance of growth, development, and protecting the environment was a very important issue, and it's been a growing experience for me. As I got more engaged in my tribal leadership role, both from my tribal perspective to the state and regional perspective, and on to the national forums that I've been very active in, our operations grew and our natural resource capacity grew. So we're very proud of our natural resource staff and team who are just excellent. They're outstanding in terms of their expertise, their knowledge, their skills, who help me understand what I should be championing for in order to protect the rivers, the streams, the habitat, the estuaries, all that are relevant to keeping or restoring salmon back to a sustainable level.
And I mean, talking about salmon, salmon are such a staple of the Pacific Northwest. And I think a lot of people don't even realize that there is a salmon problem in the Pacific Northwest. And we were talking earlier about how in a nearby river, you would be able to go there and, get salmon anytime you wanted. And then there was a year where there were seven. Yeah. So how did that happen? And also, can you, after you talk about that, can you dive into what you've done there and here to help reverse that from happening?
Well, that's a very big question with a lot of layers to it in terms of what has happened over the generations to the status and sustainability of all the salmon species, from the Chinook and Coho and Chum and Sockeye and Pinks. It's a complicated one, and we often think of the 4 H's, with regard to habitat and hatcheries and hydro issues and so forth. So they all layer, in terms of their impact. So it's not just one solution. It's a combination of issues that have had the impact to salmon. One of the H's I forgot was harvest. Okay, so you have to balance them all in terms of each of their purposes for our lifestyle in America as we have transcended from the 19th, 20th, now into the 21st century. And so, and we made a lot of bad choices, and just not having the vision to see what would happen in 100 years or 50 years, etc. And so, all of a sudden, we are here now in the 21st century, inheriting some poor choices, but we also inherited better knowledge and better understanding of the environment and the habitat and what can we do. So I participate on the international forum with the U.S.-Canada Pacific Salmon Treaty. That's the harvest management side. So we determine what the status is of all these different species, all these different stocks of the species, and then decide, who can catch how much of each of the stocks and species in Alaska, because they migrate up into Alaska, into British Columbia, because they migrate also to British Columbia, and then Washington to Puget Sound along the coast, and all the way up the Columbia River to Idaho. And it's a very delicate balancing act. So that's harvest management, and then they break down into each area in terms of who gets to catch what: sports fishermen, commercial fishermen, Indian fishermen, non-Indian fishermen, and so forth. But then the issue is, what can you do in your backyard? We try to work on the international forum, but then everybody has to go home and do what you can do in your own backyard. That's what we're doing in Jamestown. So we're trying to be a model of what are part of the solution, and that's what we've done here. The Dungeness River, which is a key river for us in the Olympic Peninsula, and so what we've been doing is a myriad of things, because this used to be this whole peninsula and what we call the Dungeness Valley, Dungeness River Valley, used to be farming. And so we had a huge irrigation system. So we've negotiated with the farmers, and as this become developed with regard to managing the irrigation water, so that as these waters on this river would get sucked up, for irrigation purposes, or as the local community of S'Klallam have huge wells on these waters down in the aquifer that this river feeds. All those things draw on the level of water that goes down this river, which all curtails the ability for the salmon to get up to the spawning grounds. And so we have to figure out where that balance is. And so what we've been doing is working with the local community, the state enforcement office, the state management organizations like Fish and Wildlife, Department of Ecology, and then of course the local governments, etc., all to try to balance out how you manage this water flow for the salmon while we take care of the needs of development, grow more houses or irrigation for agriculture.
Well, I'd love to jump in on that, because it really sounds there's these two sides. You're talking constantly about trying to provide for the tribe and your community, the people who've lived here, who have a legacy of 10,000 years of living here, but then at the same time taking care of the environment, these rivers. And so it's this multi-sense of, like, this is an old bridge behind us, but then you rebuilt it to create this incredible area where then you're actually maintaining the environment better, because we've maybe taken a step back the last 30 years. Does that kind of connect for you?
Yes, it does. And the challenge of restoring an environment is developing partnerships. Okay, you might have different political views, philosophical views, views of what growth and development is as we transcend into the 21st century. But we have to partner, and we have to have respect for each other's agenda, and find where we have common cause. And going to your point, Benji, do we care about salmon in the Northwest? Absolutely. People don't realize this is a multi-billion-dollar set of industries from Alaska to the lower 48 here in the Northwest. And salmon is a big part of that. So it's a part of who we are. We always say, like Billy Frank Jr. used to always say, we are salmon people. Salmon is our heart blood. Did we hunt? Yes, we hunted. Did we crab and go out and get shellfish? Yes, we did that. Salmon is who we are. So yes, in the Northwest, it is a big part of who we are. So we have to have partners. So sport fishermen, they should be our partners. They want the salmon to come back too. The other commercial industries, they all processors, people who take salmon and make food because of the protein, because it's healthy. It's a healthier food product. And so we have a mutual interest in that. So we've learned to start developing these partnerships between us, the farmers, the irrigators, the developers, the timber industry, who used to have poor timber industry practices, and change the way they do business and building roads and culverts for the streams that go into the river that actually feed the river and keep it in a healthy status, which is inclusive of the water temperature. The water temperature can't get too warm or the salmon won't come up it. And so that is a factor. So partnership, as we move forward, is critical to our success.
I mean, that's fascinating, because I think one thing that we're learning already on this road trip is that you have people who have problems in their own backyard, which is here on some of these rivers, for example, and you decided that you just wanted to go ahead and start fixing the problems. Like, you didn't wait for, some larger scale initiative. You wanted to fight for the environment for your local community, and you did that through partnerships with maybe what people would say are unlikely partners, right? You used the federal government all the way to sports fishermen, Is that a model that other communities can use, and why have you seen that be so effective here?
Well, it didn't happen overnight, Benji. Developing respect and confidence and trust has to be built, and you have to develop it, and you have to develop it with patience, and you have to understand where others are coming from, and walk away that, okay, we didn't quite connect up. I can tell you our project here with regard to developing water management here on this river and in this valley was a huge issue. We took the lead years and years ago, and we're marshaling on different projects that were a part of this initiative. And we had a local individual who was a very conservative individual, and it was a local politician, and she did not trust us. It was like, we're the Indians, so you can't trust them Indians. And we kind of go, well, okay. And we were leading this up. We did all the coordination. We put everything together. We provided the accommodations for the different interest groups to get together. So all the stakeholders were in the room, et cetera. So we would do all that. So we said, okay, we don't have to be in the lead. You can be in the lead. And so we turned it over to this individual who happened to be a county commissioner. But then all of a sudden she realized there's a lot of work to make this happen. And she started realizing, well, wait a minute now, this is a little too much for me and what resources I have. Maybe you should take it back over.
It's like a flea flicker, like in football.
It was just a good analogy. But anyhow, and those that were around that individual all of a sudden started having trust. And so we slowly started building this trust up, and people seeing us as part of the solution and not part of the problem, and not being fearful of what we represented with regard to our interest in this as a stakeholder.
Well, and you've seen so much economic growth over the past few years here on the tribal land and in the local community. But you've also seen incredible environmental protections that have grown at the same time. That's something that I think a lot of people, it's hard to connect those two. And you even said before we got started, you're a developer and you're an environmentalist. We have to pair those.
Most people wouldn't believe that, right?
No,
like, that's lies.
That's a lie.
You're just being on this river to pretend.
That can't be.
But if there's anyone that's more passionate about the environment than you, I haven't met him. So how do you pair those two things? And how can we as a society that is rapidly growing pair that development mentality, which we need to have, right? Pro-growth, development, economic growth mentality with this environmental protection that you've found a great balance of here?
Well, more and more of my colleagues in what we call Indian country are developing that understanding of leadership. It goes back to my favorite phrase, balance. I, as a leader for my tribe, I've been at the helm now for almost 44 years. And one of my agendas way back when I started with the tribe, I was very conservative, and said I do not want to see us continue to be dependent on the federal government. So self-reliance was a big issue for us. Well, and so that meant developing businesses so that I didn't have to depend on federal resources. I could go and get resources from our own businesses and be more independent, right? Well, then as we move forward, my responsibility to our tribe included other things, including capacity to provide quality health, capacity to provide housing. And so now I find myself building houses, so it's a little different than economic development. It's providing housing accommodation. That's all part of growth. So we were a part of the community that was building new houses and homes and to accommodate young families, or the elders for assisted living and what have you. So that became a big part of our agenda. So I had to find that balance with regard to economic development, with regard to serving the community, and also culturally protecting the environment. So the river the salmon, the wildlife, and the quality of the air that we breathe are all a big part of it. And I'm just honored and blessed to have such a strong environmental, natural resource talent around me to help educate me as a tribal leader.
Speaking to that balance, and one thing that we haven't really talked about yet, but gets me really excited, I'm Jewish. I think about Israel and how in many ways a lot of my people went and they just bought land to kind of reclaim their homeland. Part of this growth has allowed you to buy up land that was originally yours, 10,000 years of ownership here, and start to return the river to a better place. Can you speak a little to that? Because that can't happen unless you're actually building and making money on this other side. You can't reinvest in this beautiful river.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to stick with my balanced theme here. As we became more successful, and right now we're probably the second largest employer on the Libyc Peninsula.
Congratulations.
So yeah, thank you. It stems to the leadership and the talent that we were able to secure. And then we have to decide how we use those disposable resources. Okay, and just like any government, you've got to balance out where the money goes for social programs, for natural resource programs, and infrastructure, and all those many needs of any community you're serving. And so we had to too. So part of our agenda was that when we got recognized in 1981, we were landless. We had absolutely nothing. I did secure a grant from the Department of Commerce in order to buy a small tract of land, basically a 2-acre piece, and that's where we built a small community center where we basically started conducting business. As we started developing better revenue sources and income, then we realized that all these other issues that I mentioned, expanding the diversified economic portfolio, providing, acquiring land for housing and for, maybe economic development, but for the growth of our program services that serve the community. And then you deal with the natural resources. Okay, so what we're doing is from a tribal perspective, we're reacquiring our homelands. So years ago, we're a part of the Point No Point Treaty. Okay, the Point No Point Treaty, which consists of the 3 S'Klallam tribes and the S'Klallam tribe down in the base of the Hood Canal. The 4 of us are parties to the Point No Point Treaty. We ceded, as a part of the deal, well over 450,000 acres. Okay, so then that was gone. That was part of the deal. We let go, and then so we retained in the treaty, which is a contract between the federal government and the tribes, and so there was that. But now, as we became more independent and resourceful, we wanted to buy our homelands back. And so part of that package is the points that I already made, but when it comes to the river and the streams that are important to us, we found ourselves now acquiring properties along the river and the stream to help the river and the stream breathe. So that they, as the storms hit in the winter, that it has ability to breathe and not be channeled, and remove dikes, because dikes is the old mentality. I want to build right up to the river, and I don't want the river to encroach on me, so I'm going to build a dike. Then we discovered that as time went along, dikes are bad ideas.
And the river knows where it needs to go.
And needed to go. Rivers do change. They change their course.
Nature beats man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every time.
So that's what we've been doing. So going to your analogy, what we did is we are reacquiring our homelands, but for multiple purposes. But one of them is for natural resources. One of them is for the purposes of salmon and the restoration of salmon to sustainable levels.
And I think that reinvestment in your own natural resources and your own backyard is like such a cool story to tell. And I think, we had briefly talked about climate change as it pertained to these issues earlier on. Yeah. And as we're looking to the issue of climate change, do you think that model of taking this economic growth that you've seen and then reinvesting it in partially what makes your economy grow, which is the natural environment, do you think that model is kind of what we need to see more of in the national and local landscapes?
I think so, Benji. The balance and the partnership are critical ingredients to any kind of success when it comes to protecting the salmon and protecting the habitat, the wildlife, the bird life, so that they do have a place to go. They don't become endangered species, if you will. Climate change is a problem. It's real. It's real. I know that people have difference of opinion about it, but and from our perspective, from Indian country at a minimum, we believe it's absolutely a problem. The snowpacks aren't what the snowpacks used to be. So when I'm telling you I used to come down this river, and this river used to have a much higher level than it is right now, even in the lean months, which is where we are right now in September.
So we couldn't have been sitting here probably.
Yeah, we would not. Back in my day, when I used to come down here, you wouldn't sit here. You'd be way over on the bank. But the issue is that the snowpack having diminished, and that's where both the river and the aquifers nourish the community and what we all depended on, whether they're commercial wells or whether they're individual wells, etc. And so they all have an impact. So we're trying to figure out ways that creative ways to be smart about. It is an environment we're having to deal with. There's all kinds of problems that cause climate change. So not getting caught up into the different things we can do to try to curtail it back, and so that it won't encroach on our way of life as harshly as it has been. But one of the things that, as an example, we have lots of rain in the winter, throughout the late fall, winter time. We got lots of rain. So why aren't we capturing it? So that's one of the things that we in our partnership, the county and the local government, the state government, are partnering up with, developing reservoirs to capture the rain in the winter and let the irrigators and those who are in need of that water in the summer and the lean months, like right now.
It makes me think of a really old kind of saying, which is the pessimist doesn't believe the winds will change. The optimist is waiting for the winds to change, but the pragmatist changes their sails. And you have really gone into your community, and you are admitting that climate change is happening. You're doing everything you can to combat it, but then you're thinking of new ways to adapt, because you still have to preserve your legacy of 10,000 years of individuals from your tribe living here, and it all interconnects. And I almost throw this to Benji. What I'm starting to realize, it's like making my head explode, is we have this national government telling all these local governments what to do at this wide sweeping way, but every time we go into these local areas, we're meeting people like you, Ron, who are finding the answer in a local, pragmatic manner that's both providing growth and environmental protection. It's inspiring.
If I can just jump in, because that's the story that needs to be told, is that you have all these local communities that know how to take care of their local communities because they've lived here for, in some cases, thousands and 10,000s of years, and there's a legacy there where they should be relied on for the solutions. And of course there's a role for the government to play. You've worked in partnership with what you said, the U.S. Forest Service and different government entities. But it's that, as we've said probably, and probably will say too many times, is that private-public partnership angle, but it's relying on the local stakeholders to help make those decisions, because you want what's best for your community. You want to take care of this land because you literally grew up here and you've lived here your entire life, and there's no place that you would rather fight for than right here, and you would do anything to help save it. So I think that's kind of what's missing a lot of the time, is that you're, like you said, it's this wide sweeping top down approach, which a lot of the times has good intentions, but it totally leaves out the fact that every community is different and every environmental problem in each community is different.
I totally agree with that philosophy, Benji. We've always said, Hansi Hall, our National Resource Director, and I say we do what we can in our own backyard, and if we're able to influence larger levels, at the state level, or regional level, or the national level, even the international level. I've been to UN many a time dealing with environmental issues. So you can do what you can in those environments. You can do what you can to try to get common ground and find that balance of whether it's laws or whether it's regulations and whether it's resources, including funding, to make it happen. But if you can do what you can do in your backyard, then people have to look out at you and say, these guys are making a difference. These guys are making a difference. Are they the solution? No. And we've never contended we're the solution. We are a part of the solution. And that's our job. Our job is to do our part.
Well, this problem's so big, you can't be somebody saying that I have the solution. We actually have to go find, the Ron Allens. We have to visit Jamestown.
We need to clone Ron Allen.
Yes, really, indeed. We've got about 5 minutes left on this conversation. I would love to jump to a kind of completely different topic, because I think we all are interconnected to somebody who recently passed away, who's actually a conservative. You mentioned Senator Slade Gorton. He was a mentor of mine. He always told me to go into places where conservatives aren't welcome and to make that type of argument, be willing to build a partnership. It sounds like he was sometimes a partner, but also somebody that you fought with in some ways as the Attorney General. Benji, I know Slade was a mentor. Ron, I'd love to hear from somebody as you, kind of in remembrance of how important it is to meet with somebody who has a different opinion than you, but then realize we love this state, we love this land, and we need to find that middle ground to protect the Dungeness River, to protect our orcas, to, bring the mariners back.
Yeah. Well, Senator Slade Gorton and Senator Dan Evans, Governor, we call him Governor Dan sometimes as well. Both of them are amazing individuals. I always got along with Senator Dan Evans better than I did Slade, but I had a high appreciation for Slade. I mean, he was an amazing personality. I mean, he was one smart man. He had skills that were amazing. But even though he found that where he had differences of opinion, he was a bridger. He would find ways to bridge parties of difference of opinion. Governor Dan or Senator Dan, same thing. So, they had different styles to them, but they would give and take, and so they always saw the long term objective. They always saw the long term, and that was for them. That was the end game. So it was not a my way or the highway. He could be a great defender of his belief in the world and his philosophy, but it was never my way or the highway. And so I had always had great respect for that. Dan Evans, same thing. Those guys, they are just, the Northwest benefited from them. I mean, we could go back to Magnuson and Jackson and some of the many amazing leaders we've had here in Washington State. We've been blessed with amazing leadership. But I guess the lesson with Slade was, even though we had different opinion about the treaty and the status of the treaty and the relationship with the United States government and Indian country, etc., but when it came to what were your needs, did we have problems because we needed schools or we needed roads or we needed infrastructure to help us become self-reliant? He believed in that, and we found common ground. So that was a leader. That's a guy who wanted to make a difference politically within his own authority or his own capacity to influence. So those two guys were people who I had great admiration and looked up to. In many ways, I learned a lot of my own skills, having had the honor of engaging with them throughout their career.
Just quickly, I mean, that overlap is so important, and we touched on it earlier, not on the national political scale, but where you're saying you found overlap to fight for this river with so many unlikely allies. And I think that is such an important anecdote to this conversation, is that, politically, you're obviously going to disagree with people. Slade disagreed with plenty of people and disagreed with you. But at the end of the day, he could still go to dinner, shake your hand, and then whatever their overlap was, work with you on that overlap. And I just feel like that it's not just in national politics, it's just missing in society, where we're just kind of like, it is my way or the highway, like you were alluding to earlier. And it's that overlap that we need on environmental issues, specifically, I think more than any, because there are so many moving parts and there are so many groups that are involved, because it affects everyone, and it doesn't affect everyone at the source. It's like this river affects people in ways that they don't even know. So that bridge building is so important.
Well, more now than ever, right, with COVID, because everybody's just on Zoom meetings from their room. They don't get to see the real Ron Allen out here on, in your river, like in your community's river. And I think these words become so much more powerful when we're outside in nature. And we've lost just that mutual respect. You mentioned that. That's
Temporarily.
It will come back. And it'll
yeah.
start with conversations like these, right? I mean, we need to have more of these, and it's exposing that reality that once was, and not that long ago, where there was that camaraderie amongst differences of opinion, and even at this localized level, when you're fighting for everything is granular from a specific bird species to a river that feeds and sources millions of people, right? And I think that's the power.
I'm curious. I mean, you have so much wisdom. We're about to embark on this journey across the country. We're starting at home. We're starting really at your home. What do you hope we find? And what do you hope we are able to kind of share across the country that maybe you think is important that we haven't found yet in this conversation?
Well, I hope that that you will find a common cause. Find that there's a common vision and respect for America and what we need in each of our communities. We have great pride in what we are in the Northwest. So Colorado does, Arizona does, Georgia does, Maine does, and there's a common interest. They have their own balance of growth and natural resources needs and so forth. So I hope that you will find that thread that at the end of the day, the series of interviews that you conduct, that you'll find that we're not so different. We love the Northwest. We love Washington State. Coloradans love Colorado. Montanans love Montana. You Minnesotans love Minnesota. And so forth. Georgians, you can go to Oklahoma. Sometimes some of us in the Northwest say, "Why would you want to live in Oklahoma? They have all those tornadoes down there." And but if you're, but they love it, and they love their home ground, and people don't realize, Oklahoma and Texas, and they have beautiful forests too. That they're not what you think you see on TV. They're more diversified than you think, and they have a lot to offer. So I hope that you find that common thread, that common cause, that common perspective, that common interest, and a common view that the solution is here. The solution is here in our backyard. And so the bigger picture, they have their job. At the state level, at the national level, they have their job, and because we're Americans, and but we each are part of it, and so I hope that's some of what you'll find. Hope it'll broaden your mind, your perspective, your balance of your perspectives of the solutions and the challenges that are out there, and I think that it'll be an amazing journey. I mean, you'll come back and it's like the rubber band, you stretch out, it doesn't go back to its natural form. And that's what will happen with your understanding of the world about you with regard to natural resources and the rest of the interests of America and those stakeholders who defend them.
I love that. The solutions are here in our backyard, and by here, everyone's backyard.
Well, and that's what we're going to show, right, Benji? Every place we're going to go, we're going to meet people like you, Ron, who love your home, who love Jamestown, who love the S'Klallam Tribe here, and you're putting an effort to preserve it. And each place, whether it's Oklahoma or Minnesota, we're going to learn that hopefully Americans all across the country, from all different backgrounds, realize we just love our home. And we're going to make sure it's beautiful for generations, eons to come, just like you have here.
Exactly.
It's an inspiring story, and I think it's just there's so many threads to this conversation, from the economic growth part of it to the unity part of it to the localization of it. I think it's a model for what we can try to do on a national scale, but with a bunch of localities leading the way. I love that.
Yeah, that's a good phrase. You'll find that I hope that you will find that common thread, that bonds us together, I guess.
And we need to clone Ron Allen. That's what we've also...
Really? Well, I think it's time for us to get on the road. We got to get to Shelton tomorrow to start talking about the forest and how we can do better maintenance. And then we're heading to Eastern Washington. We're getting to Jackson Hole. This is...
We're heading east.
We can't
east. Really head west.
No, this Squim's almost as far as you can go. So, Ron, thank you for letting us join you in your backyard. I'm unbelievably inspired.
Well, thank you. We hold up our hands to you and to your journey, and I wish you well and stay safe, stay healthy.
Well, thanks for your incredible work on these issues over numerous decades, and you've been awarded for it, but not enough.
Oh,
Really
well, thank you,
thankful for
Benji.
you.
I-
Thankful
I,
for you.
I appreciate sharing the honor with you.
We have Ron Allen, Benjamin Becker, our host. I'm the humble executive producer, Saul Spady. Keep tuning on in. The Electric Election Road Trip and Podcast is just getting started.